In a world where darkness devours everything, one final light stands against the void. But when the last candle goes out, what remains? This is the story of a journey through fear, through doubt, through the endless night. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe for more stories. Now let's begin. The world had fallen silent, not the peaceful silence of a calm night, nor the comforting hush of a snowy morning. This was a hollow, heavy silence, the kind that weighed on the soul, pressing down like an invisible hand on the chest, squeezing, until breath itself felt like an intrusion. The sky had been swallowed by darkness long ago. No one remembered exactly when the sun had vanished, only that it had faded slowly, like a dying ember losing its last glow. Some said it was punishment, others believed it was simply fate. Either way, the result was the same. Cities turned into shadows, streets became endless tunnels of nothingness, and the people, they lost something deeper than light. They lost hope. Elias had lived in this world long enough to forget what daylight felt like. He was not old, no more than 25. But years had stretched in the darkness, making time meaningless. He moved through abandoned streets, past buildings that loomed like sleeping giants, their windows hollow eyes staring into the void. And yet, in his hand, he held a candle. It was small, fragile, and nearly burned to its last inch. The flame danced, weakly, trembling against the wind that howled through the ruins. But it was still there, still alive, and as long as the candle burned, so did he. Elias had not always been alone. There had been others, people who had tried to fight against the fading world, people who whispered stories of finding the lost light. He had believed them once. He had followed their voices, searching for the remnants of something greater. But one by one, they had disappeared. Some were taken by the darkness itself, vanishing into the endless void. Others gave up, letting the weight of nothingness crush them. He had been left behind, but Elias refused to stop. His boots crunched against broken glass as he walked through an old marketplace. The stalls were nothing more than skeletons, their wooden frames rotting away. A tattered banner hung limply from a collapsed wall, its words faded beyond recognition. He had a destination, though he did not fully understand why. A whisper had reached him, carried by the wind on a night colder than any before. A name, a place. The Tower of the Last Light. It was said that if one could reach the tower, they would find the answer to the darkness. Or perhaps something even more valuable, the truth. Elias didn't know if he believed it, but he had nothing left to lose. He pulled his coat tighter around him and kept moving. The wind pushed against him, sharp and biting, but he did not falter. The candle in his hand flickered, struggling against the unseen force that sought to snuff it out. He would not let it die. The streets narrowed as he reached the outskirts of the city. The buildings became ruins, their skeletons reaching toward the sky like hands begging for salvation. The path ahead was uncertain, filled with unseen dangers lurking in the shadows. But Elias did not hesitate, because even in the deepest darkness, one truth remained. As long as the candle burned, so did hope. The candle flickered, and for a terrifying moment, Elias thought the flame would die. He cupped his hand around it, shielding it from the cold wind that snaked through the ruined streets. The air smelled of dust and forgotten things, a scent that had become all too familiar. Somewhere in the distance, the wind howled through broken windows, a hollow sound like voices trapped between worlds. He had left the city behind. Now, the landscape was different. The buildings no longer stood tall, their frames having long since collapsed into heaps of rubble. The road beneath his feet had cracked, vines creeping through like nature was trying to reclaim what remained. There were no signs of life, no birds, no rustling leaves, not even the scurry of rats. The world was holding its breath. Elias adjusted his grip on the candle and pressed forward. The Tower of the Last Light. He didn't know if it truly existed, or if it was just another desperate lie people told themselves to survive. But he had to believe in something. If he stopped believing, he would become like the others, hollow, empty, waiting for the darkness to claim him. His steps were steady, but his mind was restless. He had heard stories about the world beyond the city. They called it the Gray Expanse, a wasteland of nothingness stretching endlessly in all directions. Those who had ventured too far never returned, their voices swallowed by the silence. Some claimed the darkness had a will of its own, that it whispered to those who strayed, luring them into oblivion. Elias didn't know if he believed that, but the wind was whispering now. It was different from before. Not just a sound, but a presence. Something curling around him, tugging at his coat, caressing his face like unseen fingers. His instincts screamed at him to turn back, to find shelter, before the storm arrived. But there was no shelter, and there was no turning back. He tightened his grip on the candle. If the light died, he died with it. Ahead, the road sloped downward into a valley of twisted trees, their gnarled branches reaching toward the sky like skeletal arms. The deeper he walked, the more unnatural the silence became. His own footsteps sounded too loud, each crunch of dirt and stone a violation against the stillness. Then he heard it, a voice, faint, almost lost to the wind. He stopped, his pulse quickening. He had not heard another voice in years. It could be a trick, his own mind playing games with him. He had heard of wanderers losing themselves to illusions, their thoughts unraveling in the endless dark. But this was different. The voice was real. Who? His throat was dry. The word barely left his lips. The whisper came again, closer this time. A single word. Help. Elias's grip tightened on the candle, his knuckles white. His instincts screamed at him to run, to leave the voice behind, to keep moving toward the tower before it was too late. But something in him refused to abandon it. Taking a slow breath, he stepped forward, following the sound. The trees closed in around him, their shadows stretching unnaturally long against the dim glow of his candle. The voice was coming from up ahead, beyond the thick roots and tangled undergrowth. Then he saw it, a figure, collapsed at the base of a tree, their body barely visible in the darkness. Their clothes were tattered, their face hidden beneath a hood. Elias hesitated. Could this be a trick? A remnant of the darkness, waiting for him to let his guard down? But then the figure stirred, a pained breath escaping their lips. They were alive, real, and they were dying. Elias knelt beside them, lowering his candle just enough to see their face. A woman, her skin pale, her lips cracked from the cold. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused, searching. "Please," she whispered. Elias's mind raced. He had survived alone for so long. Helping another meant risking himself. It meant slowing down, but it also meant something else. For the first time in years, he was not alone, and neither was she. He took a deep breath, steadying himself against the wind that howled through the valley. Then, without another word, he reached out, his candle still burning, its fragile light casting two shadows instead of one. The woman's breath was shallow, each exhale barely visible in the cold air. She was too weak to lift her head, her body slumped against the twisted roots of the tree. The darkness had already begun its slow work on her. Her skin was drained, of warmth, her limbs stiff from exposure. Elias hesitated for only a moment before kneeling beside her. "Can you hear me?" His voice felt strange in the silence, like it didn't belong. Her eyelids fluttered. A faint groan left her lips. She was alive, but barely. Elias reached into his coat and pulled out a small canteen of water. He hadn't planned on sharing it. Resources were too scarce to waste on others. But something inside him wouldn't let him walk away. He pressed the canteen against her lips, tilting it carefully. At first, she didn't react. Then, as a few drops touched her tongue, she swallowed greedily. Her fingers twitched, as if trying to grasp the canteen. But she was too weak. "That's enough for now," Elias murmured, pulling it away before she choked. She let out a ragged sigh and tried to speak. "Thank..." Her voice was hoarse, barely a whisper. Elias studied her face in the dim glow of his candle. She looked young, perhaps his age, perhaps younger. Her clothes were torn and covered in dirt, the fabric barely holding together. She had been out here for a long time. He had questions. Who was she? Why was she out here alone? And most importantly, had she heard about the Tower of the Last Light? But now wasn't the time for answers. "We can't stay here," he said, glancing around. The wind was picking up again, rustling the trees. The darkness always moved with the wind, and he didn't want to be caught in the open. She shifted, slightly trying to move. Pain flickered across her face. "Can't walk." Elias exhaled slowly. Carrying her would slow him down. It would make him vulnerable. But could he really leave her here? His fingers tightened around the base of the candle. The light is meant to be shared. He didn't know where the thought came from, but it settled in his mind like an undeniable truth. Without another word, he looped her arm around his shoulders and lifted her. She was light, too light, as if the darkness had already started draining her. She let out a soft gasp of pain but didn't protest. Elias held the candle in his free hand, shielding it from the wind as he started walking. Every step was harder now. The uneven ground, the weight on his shoulder, the bitter wind gnawing at his exposed skin. But he pressed on, one foot after the other. "You have a name?" His voice broke the silence as they moved through the valley. For a long time, she didn't answer. He thought she had fallen unconscious again. Then, barely above, a whisper. "Lena." Elias nodded, even though she probably couldn't see it. "I'm Elias." She didn't respond. Her breathing was still weak, but at least she was alive. The trees began to thin out, giving way to open ground. The road ahead was uncertain. Elias had never traveled this far beyond the city before, but he knew one thing. If they stopped now, they wouldn't survive the night. Then he saw it, a structure in the distance, barely visible against the dark horizon. Not the tower, no, this was something else. A small ruined outpost, its walls crumbling but still standing. It wasn't much, but it was shelter. He quickened his pace. The wind howled, and the candle flickered dangerously. But the flame held. For now, it was enough. Elias pushed forward, each step a battle against exhaustion. Lena's body slumped against him, her breath ragged, her strength nearly gone. The ruined outpost loomed ahead, half buried in shadows, its walls cracked with age. It wasn't safe. Nowhere was safe. But it was shelter, and for tonight, that was enough. The wind screamed as he reached the entrance, rattling the broken wooden door that barely clung to its rusted hinges. He shouldered it open, stepping into the darkness beyond. His candle was the only light, its soft glow pushing back the void. Inside, the air was thick with dust, untouched for years. The room was small, littered with debris, splintered wood, shattered glass, the forgotten remnants of a world long lost. Against the far wall, the remains of an old fireplace stood, blackened with soot. Elias lowered Lena to the ground as gently as he could. She groaned, barely conscious. Her body was too cold. If he didn't get her warm soon, she wouldn't last the night. His gaze flickered to the fireplace. He had no wood, no matches, only the candle. He swallowed hard. It wasn't enough. His fingers trembled as he pulled off his coat and draped it over Lena. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. Then, moving quickly, he gathered what he could. Broken planks, old rags, anything that might burn. The candle flickered as he knelt by the fireplace. For a moment, he hesitated. This flame. It had been with him for so long. It was more than just light. It was survival. It was hope, but hope wasn't meant to be hoarded. With a slow breath, Elias lowered the candle's flame to the dry fabric at the base of the woodpile. The tiny ember touched the cloth, and for a terrifying second, nothing happened. Then, a spark, a flicker, and finally, fire. Warm, golden flames swallowed the darkness, casting dancing shadows along the crumbling walls. Elias let out a shaky breath, relief washing over him. He had given up part of his light, But in return, he had gained something greater. Lena stirred, her eyes fluttered open, reflecting the fire's glow. She blinked, confused, before her gaze met Elias. "You stayed," she whispered. Elias shifted uncomfortably, staring into the flames. "Yeah." A long silence stretched between them. Then, slowly, Lena reached out, her fingers hovering near the fire's warmth. "I thought I was dead," she murmured. Elias didn't respond. He had thought the same. Outside, the wind howled, but the fire crackled defiantly. The darkness had not won, not yet. But Elias knew the night wasn't over, and something was watching. In the far corner of the room, beyond the reach of the fire's glow, a shadow moved. Elias went still. His eyes locked onto the corner of the room where the darkness moved, not like flickering shadows from the fire, not like a trick of the light. This was different. This was alive. The hairs on the back of his neck rose. Lena hadn't noticed. She was still reaching toward the fire, her fingers trembling as they soaked in the warmth. Her breathing was steadier now, but she was weak. Too weak to run, too weak to fight. Elias's mind raced. The stories had always warned of this. The darkness was not just the absence of light. It was something else. Something that watched, waited, whispered. And now, it was here. A sound filled the room. Soft, barely audible. A whisper. Not words. Not a language he could understand. But a feeling, a presence, a slow creeping dread seeped into his bones. Lena shivered. "Did you hear that?" Elias nodded, his fingers tightening around the base of the candle. The shadow in the corner didn't move toward them. It just lingered. A stain on the world, a void where nothing should exist. The fire's light didn't touch it. And then, the whisper came again. "Give it to us." Elias's grip on the candle nearly slipped. His pulse pounded in his ears. Lena's breathing hitched. "What was that?" He didn't answer. He didn't know how. The whisper came again. Closer this time, curling around his mind like cold fingers. "The flame. Give it to us." His throat went dry. The stories had always said the darkness wanted one thing: light. It hated the flame, yet it needed it. It was drawn to it. The stronger the light, the more it wanted to consume it. Elias shifted closer to the fire, his instincts screaming to protect it. "No," he said, barely above a whisper. The darkness shuddered. The whispering grew sharper, a rustling sound like dry leaves scraping against stone. The room felt colder. The fire crackled louder, as if sensing the presence that pressed in around them. Lena was staring at the corner now, her fingers gripping Elias's coat. "Elias!" Her voice was barely audible. The shadows coiled. Something was coming. The fire flickered. The candle in Elias's hand trembled. And then, the darkness lunged. A gust of cold air ripped through the room, slamming into the fire. The flames shuddered, almost dying before flaring back to life. The candlelight twisted, wavering in Elias's grip. He threw himself forward, shielding the fire. Lena gasped, curling into herself as the shadow recoiled, hissing. It wasn't gone. It was watching, waiting, testing them. Elias's breath came in, sharp gasps. His knuckles were white around the candle. The whispering grew softer, fading into the corners of the room. The darkness did not retreat. But it did not attack again. Not yet. Lena swallowed hard. "Elias, what do we do?" He forced himself to breathe, forced himself to think. "We keep moving," he said. "At dawn." She looked at him, eyes wide. "And until then?" Elias stared at the place where the shadow had been. His candle still burned. The fire was still alive. But the night was long, and the darkness was patient. The fire crackled, casting trembling shadows along the cracked stone walls. The whispering had stopped, but the weight of the darkness remained. Watching, waiting. Elias stayed close to the fire, gripping the candle as if it were the only thing. keeping him tethered to the world. In many ways, it was. Lena sat beside him, wrapped in his coat, her body still weak but no longer shaking from the cold. She hadn't spoken since the attack, but her eyes darted toward the corners of the room, where the fire's glow did not reach. "The stories never said it could talk," she whispered. Elias didn't look at her. The stories never said a lot of things. They sat in silence. The fire was strong now, but Elias knew it wouldn't last forever. They had just enough fuel to keep it alive until dawn, if they were careful, if the darkness let them. Lena shifted, her voice quiet. "Do you think it will come back?" Elias didn't answer immediately. He didn't want to lie. Instead, he asked, "Why were you out there alone?" She hesitated, pulling his coat tighter around her shoulders. The firelight flickered in her eyes. "I was looking for the tower." Elias's breath caught in his throat. The tower of the last light. The only place left where the darkness did not reach. The only sanctuary. The stories said that those who reached it would never fear the night again, but no one had ever returned to say if the stories were true. Lena glanced at him. "You were looking for it too, weren't you?" Elias stared into the fire. "I was surviving." She let out a weak laugh. "Is there a difference?" He didn't answer. The wind howled outside, rattling the rotted wooden door. The fire flickered, but held. Lena let out a slow breath. "I had a group," she said after a long silence. 6 of us. We thought we could make it. We thought if we followed the right path, if we carried enough light, we'd be safe. Elias already knew how the story ended. "They're gone," he murmured. Lena nodded. Her voice was steady, but he could hear the grief beneath it. "One by one. We thought we were being careful, thought we were smarter than the others. But the darkness..." She swallowed. "It's not just shadows, Elias. It remembers you. It waits." His grip on the candle tightened. He had seen enough to know she was right. Lena shifted closer to the fire. "I thought I was the last one, but then I saw you." Elias glanced at her. "And now?" She met his gaze, her eyes tired but filled with something else. Hope. "We're not alone." Elias looked away. He had spent so long believing that survival meant solitude, that the only way to make it was to walk alone, to trust no one. But now, he wasn't sure. The candle in his hand burned steady. The fire's warmth pushed back the cold, and for the first time in a long time, Elias let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they could make it. Together. The fire burned low. The wood Elias had gathered was nearly spent, and the hunger of the darkness was palpable. It was waiting. Lena dozed beside him, exhaustion finally overtaking her. The firelight painted her face in flickering hues of gold and shadow, but she looked peaceful, for now. Elias remained awake, gripping the candle with fingers gone stiff. His eyes never left the dark corners of the room. He knew better. The darkness never truly left. It was patient. It learned. And it spoke. "You cannot last." Elias's breath caught in his throat. The whisper was back, curling around his ears like smoke. "Give it to us." His grip tightened on the candle. "I won't," he murmured. The shadows quivered. The air turned sharp, heavy with something unseen. "The fire will die. Your light will fade. Give it freely, and we will let you." "Go!" Elias forced himself to breathe. "You're lying." A pause. Then, laughter. Faint. Hollow. "Am I?" A gust of wind slipped through the cracks in the walls. The fire shuddered. Elias fought the urge to shield it with his body. He needed the fire. But the darkness knew that. It wanted him to break, wanted him to believe there was no escape. He closed his eyes, steadying his breath. "Why do you want the light?" The whispering stilled. The shadows recoiled, as if caught off guard. Then, softly, "Because it is beautiful." Elias' pulse pounded in his ears. He hadn't expected an answer. and he certainly hadn't expected that one. The whisper came, again, softer this time. Closer. You've carried it for so long. Have you not grown tired? Elias swallowed hard. Yes, he was tired. But that didn't mean he would surrender. His eyes flicked to Lena. She was still asleep, her breathing slow and steady. She had trusted him to keep the fire burning. And he would, even if it meant defying the dark itself. Elias turned back to the shadows, his voice steady. No, the darkness shivered. The whispering turned sharp, angry. The room grew colder, but Elias did not move. He held the candle high, and for the first time, the darkness stepped back, just a little. The whispering faded, but the presence of the darkness did not. It lingered at the edges of the room, curling around the dying fire, pressing against the fragile barrier of light that Elias and Lena clung to. The candle in Elias's hand burned steady, but he could feel the weight of it now. The darkness had tested him, and it was not finished. Lena stirred beside him. Her eyes fluttered open, unfocused at first, before she sat up abruptly. "It spoke to you, didn't it?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Elias nodded. Lena exhaled sharply. "It does that when it wants something." He studied her face. "Did it speak to you before?" She hesitated. Then slowly, she pulled something from the folds of her coat. A matchbox. Elias's breath hitched. There were only 2 matches left inside. "I didn't want to use them unless I had no choice," she admitted, running a thumb over the worn edges. "But I think that's why it followed me." Elias frowned. "You think the darkness knows?" She nodded. "It always knows." For a long moment, they sat in silence, listening to the wind moaning through the cracks in the walls. The fire had burned low, barely more than embers now. Elias glanced at the candle in his hand. Lena followed his gaze. "How long do you think it'll last?" Elias looked at the weakened wax, at the small flickering flame. "Not long enough." Lena swallowed hard. "Then we need to move before it goes out." Elias hesitated. Leaving the fire behind felt like stepping into an open grave. But they had no choice. The tower of the last light was out there, and if they stayed, the darkness would consume them. Lena carefully packed away the matches. Then, without another word, she reached out, hesitant at first, grasping Elias's free hand. Her fingers were cold, but together, they rose. Elias lifted the candle, the fragile light casting weak rays onto the walls. The door loomed before them, barely holding against the wind. Beyond it, the storm still raged, and within that storm, the darkness was waiting. Elias took a breath. Then, together, they stepped forward. The door groaned as Elias pushed it open. A blast of cold wind rushed inside, nearly snuffing out the candle's fragile flame. He cupped his hand around it instinctively, shielding it from the storm. Lena pulled her coat tight around her shoulders, stepping out beside him. The world beyond the ruined shelter was a vast emptiness. Blackened hills, skeletal trees swaying in the storm, and the oppressive weight of the night pressing in from all sides. They had no map, no clear direction, only the stories. The tower of the last light. Somewhere in the distance, beyond the reach of the darkness, it was waiting. But between here and there, the whispering returned. Soft at first. Faint tendrils of sound curling around them like smoke. "Turn back." Elias tightened his grip on the candle. He didn't stop walking. Lena glanced at him, her face pale but determined. She heard it too. There is no tower. The wind howled through the broken landscape, carrying the voices with it. Lies, deceptions meant to plant doubt. They pressed forward. The candle flickered dangerously as they descended into a valley of crumbling stones. The shadows there were thicker, pooling unnaturally, shifting when they moved. Elias felt it before he saw it, a presence, a mass of darkness, breathing, watching. Lena's steps faltered. "Elias!" It moved. A ripple in the blackness, shifting, like a tide, rising up in a form that was neither solid nor air. The first time Elias had seen them, He had barely escaped with his life. Nightborn, not creatures of flesh, not even true shadows. They were the darkness itself. It loomed before them, hungry. Elias lifted the candle high. The light cut into the writhing shape, forcing it to shrink back, but not retreat. Not yet. Lena's breath was ragged. "It's testing us." Elias didn't respond. He stepped forward, forcing the candle's glow deeper into the valley. The Nightborn shuddered, and then it spoke. Not in whispers, not in trickery. Its voice was like the creaking of dead trees, the sigh of wind through abandoned ruins. "Give it to us." Elias's grip tightened. "No!" The thing shifted, dark tendrils reaching toward them. The air grew colder. "Your light will fade." Elias stepped forward again. "Then we will keep moving until it does." The Nightborn hesitated, and then it did something unexpected. It laughed, a slow, hollow sound, empty of warmth. Elias felt his pulse quicken. "Elias," Lena whispered, "we need to go, now." The candlelight was holding it back, but only just. The tower was ahead, somewhere, and they were running out of time. Without another word, Elias grabbed Lena's hand, and they ran. Elias ran. The cold air burned his lungs. His legs ached, but he didn't stop. The ground beneath them was uneven, treacherous, but he held the candle high, forcing the light forward, pushing back the writhing tendrils of darkness that clawed at their heels. Lena was right beside him, her breath ragged, her grip tight on his hand. They didn't look back. They didn't have to. The Nightborn were coming. The whispering turned into a roar, 1,000 voices, screaming, shrieking, demanding. "Give it to us!" Elias didn't answer. Ahead, through the thick veil of night, something flickered. A glow. Faint. Distant. The tower. Lena gasped. "It's real." Hope surged through Elias's chest, but the darkness sensed it too. The ground trembled. Shadows rose from the cracks in the earth, spiraling into monstrous forms, shapeless, endless, starving. The candle flickered. The light dimmed. No, not now. Elias willed the flame to hold, but the wind lashed at it. The cold gnawed at the wax. Lena pulled. Ahead, desperation in her steps. "We're close!" But the Nightborn were faster. The whispering turned into a crushing weight against their skulls. Their thoughts. Their fears. "You will fail. The tower is a lie. Your light is not enough." The candlelight shuddered. And then, it went out. Elias stumbled. His breath caught. The world turned to nothing. No fire, no glow, no warmth, only endless, hungry night. The voices laughed, and for a moment, Elias felt it, the weight of giving up, the emptiness of surrender. But then, a hand grasped his, warm, steady. Lena. Her voice, barely above a whisper. "We are the light now." Elias took a breath. The dark pressed in. The shadows tightened, but the tower's glow was still there. Faint. Waiting. He gritted his teeth. Then he ran. The darkness howled, clawing at them, pulling at their limbs, dragging them down. But they pushed forward. Step by step. Breath by breath. Until the soul light consumed them, blinding, overwhelming, warm. The whispers screamed. The shadows burned. And then, silence. Elias gasped, his eyes adjusting to the brilliance around him. The darkness was gone. The tower loomed above, its golden glow stretching into the sky, untouched by the night. The air was warm, the ground solid. Beneath his feet, they had made it. Lena let out a breathless laugh, collapsing beside him. "Told you." Elias chuckled, staring up at the light. His hands were empty now. The candle wasn't needed anymore, because the light had never truly come from the flame. It had come from them, from their will to keep moving, from never letting the darkness win. And now, standing at the foot of the tower, Elias knew, the stories had always been true. Because those who carried the light even when everything tried to extinguish it, were the ones who would find the way. The last candle had gone out, but the journey was only beginning. The end